Welcome to the Surgeon Enrolled Agent Exam Review webinar. This is how to pass the entire enrolled agent exam by December 31st, 2018. This is being brought to you by the Income Tax School. So welcome to all the Income Tax School students and alumni that are joining us here today. I want to start out by introducing Surgeon to all of you and myself. My name is Sean Mullen. I work in business development here at Surgeon, and more importantly, I am an evangelist for the enrolled agent credential. I strongly believe in not only the skill set of an enrolled agent, but also what being an enrolled agent can do for a taxpayer's career. So as we go through our presentation today and I demonstrate our review course to you and the subsequent study plan to use to pass the exam, understand that I truly believe that a tax preparer should strive to reach this level of expertise in their industry. I think it makes you stand out from your competitors. And it gives you all those additional goodies like representation rights in front of the IRS, just like CPAs and attorneys have. But fortunately, the path to obtain the enrolled agent is far less expensive and takes far less time than those other two credentials do. So let's begin. All right. So let's start with analyzing what we at Surgeon perceive to be the biggest problem with the enrolled agent exam, and that is that the exam gets slightly bigger every year. Year in and year out, new things are changed, modified with the tax code, and so that makes the exam much more difficult. If you look at the current enrolled agent exam, we had kind of a big tax law that was signed into effect last December, the Tax Relief and Jobs Act. And that content will have a massive impact on the enrolled agent exam. What most people don't realize, however, is that that content is not tested until the following year. So the IRS normally tests on content for a 10-month period following the tax season that was just completed. So for instance, we're in July here. The tax season just completed was for 2017 tax law. So that's what is tested on the enrolled agent exam until February 2019. Then there will be no testing in March and April 2019, and then starting in May of 2019, that is when the Tax Relief and Jobs Act content will become officially tested on the enrolled agent exam. So right now is the time to study for this exam, while the learning curve is far less than it will be next May. But the inherent problem even with today's exam is that content keeps getting added to the exam, and most review courses out there use what we call a linear study method. They start you out in the first category and the first topic and just have you read a book, and then you finish reading that book, and then they have you do practice questions, and you go back and reread the book for the questions maybe you got wrong, and then go back and do those questions again, and you basically work your way through. Unfortunately, you get to a point in time where it's been several weeks since you were last exposed to content in some of those categories. And so between that and the fact that review courses kind of overcompensate for the content of this exam, it makes it difficult for individuals to pass the test. So Surgeon takes a much different approach. We use adaptive learning, in our technology. And with adaptive learning, what we're doing is we're using a technology and an algorithm that allows you to focus your study on your weaker areas. And by doing that, what we're doing is, because we're going to concentrate on what's broken, we're going to reduce your overall study time, but we're also going to increase your ability to pass the exam. So with our course, we will have higher pass rates. So what we're going to do now is we're going to demonstrate the Surgeon ASEP technology. ASEP stands for Advanced Study Accelerator Performance. So I'm going to switch here, and we're going to go to my course. So when you first go into the course, what we want you to do is choose an exam section. I've chosen individual taxation, and for most people starting on the exam, I recommend they take part 1 first, because it's content that they obviously already know. So it's going to kind of build that confidence that you need. So we want you to go in and we want you to choose an exam date. So I've been doing webinars where I talk about being able to pass the entire exam by the end of the year and starting out with part 1 and doing about 6 weeks of study for that. So if we plot that out, then 6 weeks of study would come out to right about that first full week of September. So let's go ahead and say we're going to take our tests on Friday, the 7th of September. Okay. So 42 days away. That pegs out to be 6 weeks. And then what we want you to do, excuse me, is choose the days of the week that you want to study for the exam. Now, you could plug in and say, I'm going to study 7 days a week, and by doing that, it reduces the burden of study per day, but that really is not an effective way to study, because now you're not saying I'm going to study 7 days in a row. What you're really saying is you're going to study, in this case, 42 days in a row. And folks, nobody wants to study 42 straight days. That goes from studying for an exam to kind of like a prison sentence. So we strongly recommend to our students, and the study plan we're going to set up here today gives you 2 days off per week. So you can choose whatever you want those 2 days to be. It can be 2 days in a row, or if you want, you can, just scatter it like that. If you even want to do all your studying, let's say on a weekend, you could do all your studying on a weekend, and we'll talk about that as well. But give yourself 2 days off per week. And then the 5 days in a given week that you're going to study, you could move that around. If you knew you were going to have an appointment on Wednesday, you could move your studying that day to Tuesday if you wanted to. As long as you get in your 5 days or the recommended number of hours of study, you're going to be fine. Okay? So our software is going to move you through 3 distinct phases of studying, starting with assessment. Now, I want to be very clear about our course. Our course does not make you use a textbook as the primary source of learning. This exam tests on your ability to answer multiple choice questions. It's not how well you can do a tax return. And so the best way to teach you content for this exam is to try and teach you through the multiple choice questions. And on the back end of each question, provide a wealth of information to help you learn for those areas where you're struggling. But for other courses that we offer at Surgeon, we do have textbooks that come with the course. But for this exam, our author said a textbook is not the effective way to go. It turns out that the enrolled agent exam, the questions for it are based upon 115 IRS publications, forms, and instructions. And so what our author said is we're going to base every one of our questions and refer them back to the relevant IRS pub by page number, which to me seemed like a lot of work at the time when we first had this discussion, but he was confident he could do it, and he has in fact done it and continues to do it every single year. So we're going to start out by giving you multiple choice questions in what we call the assessment phase. And the assessment phase is 150 multiple choice questions within that exam section. So if I'm an individual, I'm going to see 150 questions in individual taxation. The purpose of assessment is twofold. Number one, it's obviously to assess. We want to figure out what you know and you don't know, and then based upon how you score, then going forward, the adaptive learning algorithm in the course is going to determine what you need to be seeing next as you go forward. But the second thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the learning immediately through those multiple choice questions. And as we go through some questions in a few minutes here, you'll understand what I mean by that. But after you've done the 150 questions, then you move into what we call the study phase. And in the study phase, now the software has a great understanding of what your strengths and your weaknesses are. What are the topics where you're doing really well? What are the topics where you're doing marginally well? What are the topics where you're doing marginally poorly? And what are the topics where you need a lot of help? And so we prioritize what you need to study based upon that scoring, but also based upon the weightings of the categories on the exam, because like in part one of the exam, which is 5 categories, the IRS doesn't test an equal 20% in every category. They test more in income and assets than, for instance, they do in taxpayer data. So because of that, we want to calibrate your studying distribution based upon not just your scoring, but also based upon those weightings. And the whole objective here is that we want you to finish your studying about a week before the exam. And to us, finishing the study means you've answered every single multiple choice question correctly at least one time, and you've averaged at least a minute per question. So we know that for the questions you're getting wrong, you're taking the steps to do the additional learning that we provide to help you master the material. Okay, so doing that, then what it leaves then is about a week's worth of time right before the exam that we call the practice phase or the practice week. In that week, you're no longer studying to learn the content. What you're doing is you're doing practice exams, because when you think about it, this is a 100-question test, 3.5 hours at a Prometric testing center. Most of us haven't done a 3 or 3.5 hour test since, I don't remember taking 3-hour tests in college. Last time I took a test that long was probably my SAT or my ACT in high school. So, I'm 51 years old. I have to kind of build up my endurance and get my mind and my body ready for what's going to be a 3-hour, 3.5 hour, 100-question test at a location that's not in my, my house, right? So for all those reasons, we want to use a final week to kind of get you into game shape. All right, so we'll go into the assessment now. This is the first phase, and so we break these into sprints of quizzes. So I'm about 43% towards seeing my 150 questions. So right now I'll click start and continue where I left off. Now, question comes up on the screen. Most of our questions are going to be either retired previous exam questions from the IRS and then updated to reflect, any changes in tax law, code, what have you. But some of those questions are going to be derivatives of old questions to reflect new tax law that came out for which has never been previous content tested. And then we're going to make a handful of questions from scratch on our own based upon, what the needs are of the content out there. All right. So when you look at questions, and this is where I want you to pay particular attention, because this is not, your objective here is not to answer the question. Your objective here is to know why the answer is correct. And there's a big dichotomy there, folks. So I want you to pay attention to this. When you're looking at this question, understand this. The IRS is trying to trip you up by making answer choices that might look the same when it's answer choices that are like words or sentences. So I always say to students, when you read a question, start out not by reading the entire question, but by reading the stem. And the stem is the last sentence before the colon or the question mark. So, to avoid the failure to pay estimated tax penalty, he should. So we're trying to avoid the tax penalty. So now I can read the entire question. Bobby Rice is an unincorporated grain farmer in Louisiana. Will a calendar year end he does not live or farm in a disaster area? Bobby computed an estimated tax liability of $25,000 for 2017. So he doesn't have the tax penalty, so what does he have to do? Then you see, make his first 2017 estimated tax payment on March 1, 2018, and then you go through. Now, realize that there's a lot of wording that's the same here. You see the word 2017, estimated tax payment, and then a date right there, and you could very quickly maybe choose March 1st instead of April 15th or April 15th instead of March 1st. So for all those reasons, you want to slow down. All right, there's no race here. There's no contest for getting through this fast. So make sure you thoroughly read through all 4 answer choices. And I say this because in having worked with exam prep candidates now for 31 years, the main reason why students get questions wrong is not because they don't know the content. It's because they race through and they either misread a word, a date, or number, or dollar amount in the question, or they simply read through the answer choices so fast that they don't realize that the best answer choice was one they didn't choose. So for all those reasons, you want to slow down and make sure you choose it. So let's say that we all put our heads together and we all agree that the answer is going to be B, which I guess is B for every single question when I demonstrate. So I'll say B, and I got it wrong. So at this point, your eyes might gravitate over here to the right and look where it says incorrect and then read the explanation, but we don't want you to do that. First thing we want you to do is we want you to do this biopsy. Why did you get the question wrong? And remember that I said you're going to get questions wrong because it's either going to be you didn't know the content, or you misread the question, you missed a date, a word, a number, a dollar amount, or you kind of raced through the answer choices and didn't thoroughly read it. For all those reasons, on every single question you get wrong, we want you to do this exercise. Determine what happened for you to get the question wrong. Because if you realize, for instance, that you keep answering A and B and are getting questions wrong, the answer is C and D, it might very well be that you're just simply reading through the answer choices so quickly that you're not fully comprehending what's being given to you as an answer choice. That happens quite a bit in exam prep. And in 31 years, that's when I review students' practice exams and I see they're getting a lot of questions wrong. I'll look at it and see that their average time per question is becoming shorter and shorter as they get further through the exam, which means they're starting to race through. They're trying to read faster because let's be honest, sitting in a prometric testing center to take one of these tests is not the most exciting thing you're going to be doing that day. In fact, you want it to be over with as quickly as possible. And what's a better way to get a test done with quicker than to read it faster? And that's where you make mistakes. So for all those reasons, do that biopsy. And then once you've done that, then come over here to the right. And I want to point out that our subject matter expert, Dr. Anthony Curatola, who's out of Drexel University, goes into painstaking detail to explain why the answer is in fact correct. And if you compare our review course to any other enrolled agent exam review course out there, I can almost guarantee you will not find anybody who puts the explanations together and content to the detail that Dr. Curatola does. And that's important because, remember, this is where you're learning. We've eliminated you having to go read a book for the sake of reading a book. So somewhere we got to give you the nuts and bolts of what you need to learn. And so he does it here. So he starts out by talking about Pub 505, page 29, talks about the gross income for 2/3 of taxpayers is from farming. And so going down from there, he walks you through the kind of the rules and the formulas involved, and then again refers you to Pub 505, pages 229 and 57. This is the basis of this exam. This exam, and these questions are coming from the pubs. So if you look at this question right here, the basis for this question, it comes from Pub 505. So what we'd like to do is list that location within the pub. And then up here at the top, you'll see you have an IRS button, which is now active. You can click on it, and then you have forms, instructions, publications. So I'm looking to go to publication 505, so I'll click view, scroll down. There's publication 505, click on view. And what it does is it opens up Pub 505 for me. So I can go in, and now I'm not reading a 63-page document, folks. That's not what we're telling you to do. We're telling you to go to the specific pages in the pub that reference that exact content for this question. All right? So you're only doing that on questions you're getting wrong or where you're confused. All right? So in addition to providing the explanations, as you see right here, which are very detailed, we also define the key terms. We are not going to make any assumptions as to what you should know or not know when it comes to this content. We're going to even define for you what a tax return is. We're going to tell you what a deduction is, what a dependent is. We're not making any assumptions you should know this versus that, okay? So because of that, this question deals with estimated tax and estimated tax payments and self-employment tax. Each one of these terms, you can actually click on it, and we provide the explanation for you, or the definition, if you will. So this is a tremendous source of learning that's available. But the great thing is that it's as needed. We're not going to simply force you to learn about estimated tax because it's there. We're making you access it. We're giving you the ability to access it if you need it, which is why we don't want to use the textbooks. Everything now you're doing is on demand based upon need. Okay? Let me do one more question here because I want to show you one more feature. So much of what we do with this course is based upon analytics and data. Questions you see next are based upon questions you've already seen. And so because of that, having the data for scoring be as accurate as possible is incredibly important. So when you come across questions where you look at it and you have absolutely no idea what the answer is, you can't even make some logical assumptions to say, well, I know it's not answer choice A, and I know it's not C, it's got to be either B or D. If you can't even do that, and you're looking at it and you say to yourself, no idea, what we don't want you to do is just take a stab at it and just guess it, because there's a 25% chance you're going to guess this question correctly. And if you do guess it correctly, the software is going to think you know the answer to this question. And if it thinks you know the answer to this question, you will see this question less often going forward. And this is a question where if you're like completely clueless, folks, you want to see this question and similar questions a lot more often. So that's why, for all those reasons, don't just take a wild stab and submit it. Instead, come up here and click Mark as Guest. Then it will mark the question wrong automatically. And then it doesn't matter which answer choice you chose, it will mark the question as being wrong. Now, I want to point out something in this question. Notice that we highlighted or put in bold the word not. We did that as a kind of an exercise for you, because if I don't have that word not in this question, it completely changes the meaning of the question. Which of the following is a payment deductible as alimony? Well, life insurance premiums required by the divorce decree, those are deductible. Mortgage, half a mortgage interest on a joint home, that's deductible. Payments for child support, whatever. I mean, what you're seeing now is that these like medical expenses, those look like they're correct. It's because you missed that word not. That's why I say again, you need to slow down on these questions. There's nothing gained in the studying for an exam by trying to race through it. Okay, so now I get to read the explanation. My scoring remains true and pure, and the diagnostics are going to be better for me. All right, so let's exit out of here. I'll say yes, and so we're in the assessment phase, which I would have to see another 83 questions to finish it, but let's pretend for a minute that we've finished the assessment phase. Okay, let's say we've done our 150 questions. So I'm going to take us out of here for a minute and exit out of the session. And if you had finished the assessment phase, then every time you logged into the course, you would come here. This would become your study phase. This is phase 2 of your studying. So you finished the assessment, you've seen 150 questions. What the software is doing now is it is creating what we call surge cards. And the primary surge card is the study session card. What it is doing, it is building study sessions for you based upon your previous studying history. So in blocks of 10, 30, or 50 questions, the software is going to give you a setup of questions that are tailored to what your specific learning needs are. And it does that based upon the data up here in what we call our progress report. The progress report is your scorecard within an exam section for the major categories shown as the overview, and then you see here's our 5 major categories in part 1, but also within the individual topics within that category. So for instance, in preliminary work and taxpayer data, as an overview, I'm scoring 57% as my ready score, 55% is my average score. My average score is all my studying. My ready score is my more recent study history, which is more relevant. But if I break it out, you see in preliminary work, taxpayer tax returns, well, I'm doing great. I'm doing 80%. But down below that taxpayer data, I'm really struggling. I'm only scoring 33%. So what's going to happen is I'll see more questions in this category from 1B, taxpayer data, than I will preliminary work tax returns. So I can scroll down and I can see, like, for instance, in income and assets, 2A, I'm terrible. I'm scoring 0 in that topic, whereas other ones like adjustment income, I'm up at 67%. So because income and assets is tested more than preliminary work and taxpayer data is, I'm going to see more questions out of this category, but I'm really going to see a lot of questions out of 2A, which is income, because I'm horrible in that topic, okay? So that's what the adaptive learning algorithm is doing. It's choosing questions for you to study based upon your previous studying history. All right, so what you would do at this point when you're in the study phase is you are now doing kind of your ham and egg studying. Ham and egg studying is you're doing the adaptive learning every session, preferably 30 or 50 questions, learning from the questions and watching your scores improve over time. If you do this correctly and you make your objective that for every single question, your objective is to leave the question knowing why the correct answer is in fact correct, you're going to be on your way to passing this exam. All right? But let's say that of the 664 questions that are in this course now, let's say you've seen 400 or 500 questions and you still see that you're struggling in some topics where your score in those topics, like for instance in income and assets, my 2A income, let's say that my score in that is really, really struggling. As you see right there, I'm scoring a big 0. What I can do is I can turn off the adaptive learning studying, which, you know, it's kind of like a GPS. It's presenting to you what you need to study. You just go and study, just like GPS tells you, you know, where to go, when to turn, etc. We're basically doing the same thing here with our adaptive learning. But at any point, you could come down, and what I did, folks, is I clicked on this category, income and assets, which is category 2. And when I do that, it opens up and shows the subcategories there and then how I'm doing in those topics. So in income, category A, I'm scoring that big 0. So I could come over here, and you see there's 73 questions. I could click on the pencil, which means I want to study just that topic. Then I could choose the number of questions I want to study, 5, 10, 25, or 50. And then for those questions I'm going to choose, I can choose to see those questions using the adaptive learning algorithm. So it takes questions out of that topic, and with the algorithm, the questions I've missed the most, I'm going to see first, and then questions I've seen a little bit less, but I'm still struggling, I'll see those next, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to make me focus on those problem areas. But I can also say, you know what, I just want to see all the questions in there. Give me 50 questions, pulling from the entire database, you know, or 25 questions from the entire database with no conditions. Or I could say, you know what, I only want to see new questions, questions I've never seen before, or I can even see questions seen the least number of times. So questions I've never seen will be given first, and then questions seen only once next, etc. But I also have the ability to do trouble questions, which are questions that I'm getting the answer wrong at least 50% of the time. And then miss last time seen is exactly what you think it is. It's questions missed last time seen. So what I strongly recommend is if you're about 2/3 your way through your studying, you want to see it based on either the adaptive algorithm or trouble questions or missed last time seen. And if you do any one of those, it's going to allow you to really focus in those problem areas. So you could begin your session like that, start it, and go through it. Generally, I recommend that one-off studying. So you've turned off the GPS, and what you're doing instead is you're focusing on the problem areas. And my recommendation is to do that when you come across any topic where you're scoring. So for instance, I'm scoring 32 in the category, but now I'm 0 in that topic. So anywhere where if you are 2/3 done with your studying and you are 20% or more less, 20%, 20 points less, 20% or more, you know, percentage points lower in score, which clearly this is the case here, that's an area you want to go back in and focus on more, okay? So I generally don't recommend the topic by topic studying, because that's what we're trying to avoid with adaptive learning. But if you're 2/3 through it and you recognize that there's a topic where you're really struggling, then you could go and focus and do studying in that area. All right. So another issue or feature we have is called our session results log. And the session results log, it shows every study session you've ever done, when it was done, how many questions there were, how you scored. And so I did a session on the 17th. Where are you? Well, let's pick this one here that I did on the 29th of June. I did 15 questions. I got 7 of them correct. So I click View, and it will bring up that entire session. It will show me in that session which ones were wrong at the top, and then down below which ones were correct. All right? With each one of these, either the correct or incorrect, I can go and click Review, and it will allow me to see that question again, what my answer choice was and what the correct answer was. And then I can still access my pubs, the IRIS pubs right there if I want. So this allows me to go back and review each question within a study session, so it's never lost. I don't have to keep some running record, you know, on pencil and paper of how I did on all the questions. It's done for me automatically. The nice thing about this report is that it also then brings to the surface those key terms associated with questions you were getting wrong. So I was missing a lot of questions that dealt with basis and credits and estimated tax payments and exchange and fair market value, et cetera, et cetera. So I can immediately bring up and see those terms right there. So between being able to see the questions again, going to the IRIS pubs again, and doing these key terms, what I'm allowing myself to do is to access additional tiers of learning. But now we're not just pushing it all and you saying, okay, consume all of it. You're only accessing as much as you need until you master the material. All right, and so when you do a practice exam, you can do the same exercise with a practice exam. After you've done the test, you can go to your session results and look at every single question you got wrong. And that will by doing that, that will allow you to really dial in on where you're having problems. All right, let's go back to our dashboard here. And so when you finally finished enough questions, let's say you're 2/3 through your studying, or maybe in your final week of studying, then what you can do is do a practice exam. And for a practice exam, we're going to queue up a time test. Same question count as an actual exam, same time limit. And what's going to happen is, let's say you've done 92 questions, all right, in the test, so you run out of time. Questions 93 through 100 are going to be marked wrong, just like in the actual exam. So we emulate the question count, the question distribution, the weighting, and time limits of an actual exam. And when you do a question in our test, you immediately go to the next question. You don't know whether you're correct or incorrect, just like in the actual exam. So we're really working on the timing and endurance that goes with the practice exam. All right. So that is the kind of the nutshell of the Surgeon Enrolled Agent Exam Review. What I want to do now is I want to go back into our presentation, and let's talk about the study plan that goes with that. So let's go to my presentation right here. Open that up, and let's go to my slideshow from my current slide. There we go. So we just finished the ASEP Technology, which stands for Advanced Study Accelerated Performance, which we use on all of our courses: CPA exam review, enrolled agent exam review. Now let's talk about developing a study plan. And this is specifically, folks, this is a study plan for enrolled agent with surgeon to pass the entire exam before the end of 2018. So let's first talk about the test sequence, all right? There's 3 exam sections. Part 1 is individual, Part 2 is business, Part 3 is practice and procedures. I strongly recommend taking parts 1 and 3 first. Most people like to take part 1 first because that's content they're used to, which is great, but some like to take part 3 first. The reason why they like to take part 3 first is because it's content they don't know, so they actually have to get into real studying. And so there's not a lot of content to have to study to pass part 3, but it kind of conditions your mind to get into actual study and learning mode. So it's interchangeable, but if you start with part 1, you should budget about 45 hours of studying with our course. And that 45 hours is doing the multiple choice questions and mapping to the IRIS pubs, reading those pubs. That's all the learning involved with this, including doing your practice exams. So 644 questions in the course. You're going to be looking at doing every question at 45 hours. You can do every question roughly 2.5 times each. And you're going to spend roughly 1.5 minutes per question on average. And that 1.5 minutes is reading the question, studying the answer choices, selecting an answer choice, submitting it, and then reading the explanation we have afterwards, defining any key terms, and then if necessary, opening up that IRIS pub. So clearly, on some questions, you're going to know the answer, you're going to get it correct, and it's going to take 20 seconds. Other questions, it might take you 3 minutes from start to finish because you were doing a lot of learning in that particular question. So on average, about 2.5 minutes. When you get to part 3, after you've passed part 1, then as practice and procedures, this is circular 230. This is a lot of memorization, folks. This is the tax preparer did this, what's the penalty? The taxpayer did this, what's the penalty? You're going to memorize a lot of naughty behavior and a lot of nasty fees and penalties for doing it. It's like you're memorizing a high school civics exam. Fortunately, we have been very successful with keeping our databases compact. So only 354 questions are necessary for you to be able to go through, thoroughly study, along with the IRIS pubs, and understand this exam. So again, 2.5 times per question, 1.5 minutes per question. You'll knock this out in about 30 hours of study. Okay? So after you've passed part 1, and you will pass part 1, and after you pass part 3, and you will pass part 3, even though that's 2/3 of the exam, it's only roughly maybe 50%, if not less, of your total studying. So after you pass those 2 parts, you're going to need to take a week off. And I say that because when you jump into part 2 of the exam, which is business entities, this is the area most of us don't have that experience in. It's going to be a longer haul. It's going to be more questions. It's going to be more time per question because there's a lot of content that you just don't know. And so in that area especially, Dr. Curatola takes great length and pains to make sure you understand the content for these. So it's just going to be more reading. So as a result, you're going to see every question probably 3 times on average, and you're going to average 2 minutes a question, not a minute and a half per question. So all in, you're going to be looking at about 90 hours of studying. And so in the aggregate, you're looking at about 165 hours of studying. What I say to students is if you budget 200 hours for all 3 parts, that gives you some wiggle room if you're struggling with some areas, but very manageable to get through and pass all that before the exam. All right, so that's your breakout of your studying. Now let's talk about the actual study plan on a weekly basis, all right? So starting with part 1, 6 weeks of study. You're going to start on week 1 getting through that assessment. You're going to average about a minute and a half per question, 6 hours of study should be able to get you through easily those 150 questions and then possibly even move forward into phase 2 and do some adaptive learning in that first week. But what you want to do is you want to knock out that assessment as quickly as possible so the software can make you focus on what you need to study. Then in weeks 2 through 4, this is your ham and eggs of your studying. This is 5 days a week, 60 questions a day. You're going to be studying using the adaptive learning, a minimum of 60 questions per day. If you want to knock out 70, 80, 90 questions, then do it, because the more you can get ahead of your studying, the better off you're going to be. All right, so that's roughly 60 questions minimum per day, 5 days a week. Whatever 5 days are, you can move those around. If you want to do it on the weekends, I'll show you in a minute here how you could break that out on the weekends. But very important here, at the end of week 4, you want to schedule your test at Prometric. Get that test scheduled because if those of you who have scheduled an exam before, you're going to find very quickly the closest test center to you is probably going to fill up very quickly. If you wait until the week that you want to take your exam to try and schedule a test, it might not be as conducive to the date and time you want it to be. So for all those reasons, commit at the end of week 4 to scheduling your test. Then you move to week 5. So you've been doing the adaptive learning at this point. What we want you to do in week 5, because remember I said when you're about 2/3 through your studying, start doing those customized study sessions instead of doing adaptive. You're going in and you're doing individual topics, and those topics you're going to choose questions missed last time seen, so you're kind of focusing on those problem questions. And then with it, what you want to do is do those reading lessons. Remember when we tell you the IRS pub by page number? Make sure you're hitting that on all these questions you're getting wrong. The greatest book for this exam, folks, is the IRS pubs, because that's what the questions are based upon. So hit those publications and learn that content. And then you're going to move to week 6. At the end of week 6, you're going to take your exam. But before then, we want you to do a couple of practice exams at a minimum. Why 2? Well, because the first one's not going to be very good. I told you that most of us haven't done a 3-hour exam since we were in high school. I'm 51 years old, so when I say it's been a while since I've done a 3-hour test, I'm not kidding you. It's been 30, some odd years. So because of that, what you want to do is you want to take your first practice exam, which is probably not going to be a very good score. But then you've gotten used to the idea now of kind of the pacing and the patience you need with this test. Your second exam score is going to be much higher. And if you do maybe even a third test, then you'll probably score even higher. You're going to feel confident that you know how to pass the exam. Go ahead and then you'll sit and pass that week. All right? So after you pass part 1, and I can't state this enough, you will pass part 1. You're going to move to part 3. And folks, this is going to be a shortened, instead of a 9-inning baseball game, you're looking at 4 or 5 innings. This is going to be a 4-week sprint. In week 1, you're going to first start out by doing the assessment. Get that out of the way and see if you can do it in 2 days, 75 questions per day. And then what you want to do after that is do 60 questions for the remaining 3 days. That not only gets the assessment done, but it gets you a considerable way through the study phase of the course. And then in week 2, you're going to do nothing but adaptive learning. 60 questions a day, 5 days a week, knock out 300 questions. And what that does is that basically positions you very well to move into the final 2 weeks. So at the end of week 2, you'll schedule your test. And then in week 3, you're going to move over to customized study. You may find that you don't need to do that because This is a topic where most people are kind of learning a lot of it for the first time. I mean, we all know a little bit about Circular 230, but the nuts and bolts of penalties and, you know, on what month you have to have your CP completed, that becomes a little bit more gray. So generally, if our scores are, let's say, 40 or 50%, they're 40 to 50% across the board on all topics. But if you have individual topics where you're struggling, then yes, do the customized study, and then more importantly, read that circular like Pub 230 if you have to, or Circular 230, not Pub 230, if necessary, to make sure you're mastering the material. All right. Then you go into week 4, you do your practice exams, at least 2, preferably 3. What you really want to try and do is see if you can get 2 tests in a row with a score of 85% or higher. If you do that, you're going to pass this exam. At the end of the week, take your actual exam. All right. So after you've passed parts 1 and 3, and I can't state this enough, you will pass parts 1 and 3. Do not start studying for part 2. Take a week off. It's important that you do that because, folks, you're now looking at an 8-week, nearly a 2-month phase of studying where every day, 5 days a week, you're going to be doing studying for this exam. This is when you're going to be recording The Bachelorette or Big Brother or any show that you want to watch, because it's going to be more important that you want to study for this exam. So week 1, get the assessment finished. I cannot stress how important it is that you want to dedicate that first week to getting entirely through that assessment. And it's going to take longer because now you're going to be looking at 3 minutes a question, because so many of these questions are going to be on topics you've never seen, never experienced in your professional career. So you're going to get that out of the way. And then you're going to go to weeks 2 through 6, where you're going to do nothing but adaptive studying, adaptive learning, 60 questions a day, 5 days a week for basically 5 weeks. This is why we wanted you to take that a week off after passing part 3, because you're going to put in a long haul, and somewhere in that weeks 2 through 6, you're going to say to yourself, this is never going to end. It will end, folks. It'll be ending in about 3 more weeks. So we want you to stay positive, which is why we wanted you to reward yourself for that week off before you started part 2. So finish your studying through weeks 2 through 6 of the adaptive learning, 60 questions per day, and then schedule that test at Prometric. Again, cannot stress how important it is to get that test scheduled 2 weeks out, if not more. Then you move into week 7. You'll do the customized learning at that point for the topics where you're struggling, choosing questions missed last time seen. You're going to be doing a lot of reading in the pubs, when it comes to part 2, because a lot of this you're going to be learning it for the first time. Then you'll move into week 8. Week 8, you're going to do your first practice exam, and I'm preparing you for the obvious right now. Your first score is going to be terrible. You're not going to do great at all in that test, and you're going to wonder what was going on. But then you're going to take a second test, and you're going to score much higher. And then you're going to take a third test to score even higher, and you're going to feel the confidence at that point. Again, if you can do 2 exams where you've scored 85% or higher, you're going to pass this test, and then you'll sit for the actual exam. It's important to point out that the pass rates between parts 1, 3 are both about in the low 70, 72, 73%. This is on a nationwide basis. The pass rate for part 2 is not that much less. It's probably 65, 64, 65%. So it's a very passable exam, and it's being taken by people just like you that probably do mostly individual returns with a couple of corporate items scattered in, but nothing over the top. And so these are people that actually study for the exam just like you are. The reason why part 2 exam pass rates are lower than part 1 and 3 is not because of the content. It's because most courses out there put so much content that you have to study into part 2 that it becomes this exercise where you had to study 300 or 400 hours to get through all the content they put on with their courses. Some of the courses out there in the aggregate have 3,500 multiple choice questions that they make you go through, plus their textbooks. So if you look at that versus our course, which is 1,800 multiple choice questions, which is all you need, we're getting you through the studying in under 200 hours in the aggregate. Those courses are making you study, 200 more hours, 300 more hours, 400 more hours, plus the book studying. It's not unusual that you could spend 300 or 400 hours of studying just for a single exam section. And when you think about it, folks, 400 hours for one exam section when you are working full time. You might have two jobs because you're only working taxes during tax season and during extensions, but you might be working a second job, or you might be like me with 4 kids and married, and you actually have a life outside of studying for the enrolled agent exam. So for all those reasons, you want to make use of the hours you have available for studying to make them as efficient as possible. That's why when people have used part 2 of other courses, they just never got through the study. They didn't pass the exam. And with our course, with about 95 hours, you can get it finished. All right. So I had mentioned that a lot of you are going to say, I can only study on weekends. That's fine. If you're going to study on Saturdays and Sundays, absolutely do that. But recognize that trying to study 5, 6, 7 hours at a time is counterproductive. As adult learners, we actually have this saturation limit when it comes to how much we can reasonably study at a time before we're basically reading the words on the screen for the sake of reading the words on the screen, and we're not absorbing it at the same rate we were when we first started studying. So because of that, I say to students, break your studying into a morning and evening session of no more than 2.5 hours each. And if you do 2.5 hours, so that's, let's call that 150 minutes, give yourself a 20-minute break in the middle of that. So you're doing 2 sessions of 75 minutes, or maybe, even 3 sessions of 60 minutes each with a 10, 15-minute break in the middle. Doing that and then giving yourself a midday, 3 or 4 hours where you do no studying at all, 5 hours, and then in the evening, go back and do the same thing again, is going to be far more productive for you. But if you want to study during the week, also realize that we're not saying study at night, an hour at a time or 2 hours at a time. What you can do is you can break out your studying into smaller bits. We have a lot of students that like to get up, get their coffee going, study 10, 20 questions, and then they turn around and at lunch do another 10 or 20 questions, and then do the rest of it in the evening. The more studying you do in the morning and midday, it's less studying you have to do at night. So don't think you have to do this in one fell swoop. All right, you can do it in small amounts. That's fine. All right, so just to cover again the ASEP technology of our course, what it does is it personalizes the study for you. We're not doing linear studying. We're not saying start here and go through every question, every page of the book and read for the sake of reading it. We're going to personalize the study plan for you. So we're going to make you study what you don't know, which is going to reduce your study time dramatically. Dozens of hours study time are going to be reduced per exam section. And in the aggregate, we are literally talking about hundreds of hours of reduced study time by using our course. And with our course, you will know when you're ready to take the exam because those practice exam scores will be pretty indicative of what you'll be doing on the actual exam. All right? So, Surgit comes with a pass or refund guarantee. If you follow our method of studying and you do not pass your exam section, we're going to refund your money for that section of the course. And what we want you to do is to answer every multiple choice question correctly at least one time, average at least 1 minute per question. So we know that if you are following our studying and you get a question wrong, you're taking the time to read the explanation. You're taking the time to open up that Iris Pub. You're clicking on the key terms. So you're taking the steps to learn the material. So if you take the exam after doing that and you don't pass, just send a copy of your score report to us within 30 days of the test. Ask for the refund, we'll process the refund. For people that have done that studying, we have issued less than 50 refunds in now since 2004 on this course, which is over 40,000 exam sections sold. Actually, at this point, it's probably closer to 45,000 plus exam sections sold. But we haven't done a single refund in the past 2 years. In fact, come early next month in August, it will actually be 3 years since we issued a refund. We know you can pass the exam with this course, and this is how I know it. My wife, who's never done a tax return in her life, at least except for maybe the easy return for our kids, and even then we need a little bit of help to get it done, passed parts 1 and 3 of this exam using the Surgeon Enrolled Agent Exam Review. We guinea pigged it with her because we knew she was someone that had no tax experience, but she would do the studying the way we told her to do it. And so she passed parts 1 and 3. She didn't sit for part 2 because at that point we had child number 4 on the way. So we focused on child number 4. But I know you can pass with this course. If you give me anybody who's 18 years old or older, have a study with this course, even if they've never done a tax return in their life, they will pass the exam with our course. And I couldn't begin to count the number of people that have passed the exam, having never done a tax return in their life, and then reached out to us to thank us afterwards. So yes, this exam is a passable exam, not because you need to know the tax content, which clearly you do, but you need to know how to be a test taker for this exam, which is what we do. All right. So for your income tax school students, the great news is that the income tax school has negotiated a pretty sizable discount on our course. Our retail price of our course is $499 for the full course, or $189 per exam section. There's a discount in place of 20% if you order the course before July 31st. So you'll go to the URL that you see right here, and we will be sending this presentation to you, so you don't have to write down the URL. But it's the income tax school /shop xed, etc. And you'll see this link right here is where you go to choose the course. You can then select to view price. So you're going to choose a full course or a single section and click enroll now. Put in one of these two discount codes that you see, and they will then do the discount. And that discount is there through July 31. That'll make your final sales price $399.20 for the full course, or $151.20 for the single exam sections. Now, if you have not already done so, we strongly recommend that you go in and sign up for a free 3-day trial of the course. So if you go to the URL you see right here for the income tax school, there's a form you can fill out that will then allow you to sign up for a free 3-day trial of the course. This is the course I just demonstrated to you. It's the actual course. You get a test drive it for 3 days. I cannot stress enough how important it is for you to try this out before you decide to enroll in the course. We want our students to be confident that this is what will get them past the exam, because at the end of the day, confidence is half the battle when it comes to this exam. So that's why we want you to do the trial. All right. So for anyone who enrolls in this course by the end of July 31, we're going to be doing a coaching session for all those students. And I notice I've spelled coaching wrong there. But what it's going to be is on August 15th, anybody who's enrolled in the course will get a 1-hour session. We're going to show you how to read the data in your progress report. So it's going to be like, I'm looking at my scoring. What does that mean? Do I do adaptive learning at that point? Do I do customized learning? And then we're going to kind of go through the assessment, study, and practice exam phases again, how to read the scoring report on those when you do a practice exam, things like that. It's going to position you to, if you enrolled in the course, let's say by the end of July, and you did a couple of weeks of studying, we're basically mapping out what happens next for you after you've done the assessment. So very valuable coaching session to have when we spell coaching correctly. So sign up by the end of July, and that will be available to you. All right. So why do you want to sit for the exam in 2018? Because it's easier to pass. The Tax Relief and Jobs Act is not going to be tested until May 2019. Folks, if you think this exam is difficult now, wait and take this exam next May. It's going to be content that you just don't know that well, even though you just did a tax season on it. There are so many nuances that relate to corporate taxation and pass-through entities that deal with this tax act. You do not want to deal with that from an exam perspective. So pass the exam this year. And by passing the exam this year, if you do it, let's say by the end of December, you can apply and get your credential before tax season really kicks into gear. So wouldn't you like to start 2019 tax season as an enrolled agent, market yourself and your credential to your new customers? And I would strongly recommend you educate your clients on the value of the tax preparer being an enrolled agent, because in this industry, there's a lot of people that do tax prep from a data entry standpoint. They're just looking at the information and typing it into their tax software. They don't know the consequences of what they're putting in, or whether there is something that's missing that would make the customer have a better tax return. By becoming an enrolled agent, you can say to your clients, this is the level of expertise that I have, that not only will I do a better job for you than other tax preparers can do, but also I can represent anybody in front of the Internal Revenue Service when it comes to a tax issue, which is something only enrolled agents, CPAs, and attorneys can do. All right, folks. If you have questions, we want you to contact the Income Tax School at customercare@theincometaxschool.com or calling them at 800-984-1040. Questions on the enrolled agent course, questions on the tax school, the tax program, the certified tax preparer programs that they have, any of those, reach out to the Income Tax School. And if it's a question on the enrolled agent exam course by Surgeon, they'll make sure that one of us helps them answer that question and get the answer back to you very quickly. All right, folks, thank you all for your time this evening. We greatly appreciate it. Even if you don't choose Surgeon to sit for the enrolled agent exam, take the exam this year, get that credential. There is just a great value to your career by having that. And so we highly recommend you do that. All right, folks. Thank you all for your time. We greatly appreciate it, and we wish you all great success in your career and on the enrolled agent exam. Take care.